This week, I'm fixing tools and getting back to basics. It's been a couple of months since I've done any real throwing. I missed it, and I also feel tremendously rusty. And when that's the case, I tend to always start back with mugs. Simple shapes that are relatively easy to make and to get my hands going again. At the same time, I'll be discussing lots of little tips and tricks which I use when throwing repetitively. This past week has been really cold, and after not being in the workshop for 2 weeks over the holidays, it's frigid. So, thick socks, warm shoes, layers, and perhaps most importantly, when it comes to actually throwing the pots, I'm going to be using basically boiling hot water. I'll even fill this bucket up with hot water, which is a container I keep to the left of my wheel to scrape the slip off my hands, wash tools, and clean my hands, which happens a lot as I'm constantly having to change camera angle. The last thing you want to do in winter is throw with cold water. These are the tools I'll be using for throwing. I try to keep them really simple, and I also try not to use too many. Normally, I use a kidney or two for shaping the outside of the pot and scraping the slip off. Next, there's a ruler, which only really gets used at the very start, as I always begin by throwing the initial shape, measuring it, and then setting my throwing gauge. There's a chamois leather for smoothing the rim, a wire for separating the pot from the wheel, an old blunted turning tool for scraping away the excess clay around the base, a sponge on a stick for soaking up the water from inside the cups, and finally a sharp needle for popping bubbles or fixing the rim. As for the clay I'll be using for these mugs, I've got a bunch of reclaim left that contains specks of bronze, which eventually create these red specks on the surface of the pot that appear at random. Each one of these lumps weighs 300 grams plus or minus 10. This helps to speed up the process of weighing them out and doesn't really make any difference in the finished pieces, as that amount of clay is easily lost on one's hands or it's removed by tools during the throwing process itself. Each ball of clay is then given a quick wedge. This isn't so much to wedge the lumps and remove pockets of air, but simply to amalgamate the weighed out pieces that are amassed to form 300 grams. Now, the first mug I make is always the worst. It's a bit like when you're making pancakes. The first one's always a bit of a dud, and in this instance it's thrown and measured very carefully to exactly 11 centimeters tall by 8.5 centimeters wide. The thing is, for this first one, as my pointer isn't set, I don't have that physical target in space to aim for yet, but after setting my throwing gauge's pointer just beside the rim of the mug, every pot hereafter will be much easier to throw, as I know how tall and wide they need to be. Think of it like this: when you're playing basketball and there's the physical hoop, you know exactly where to throw that ball, and with enough practice you can probably get it in every time. But if that physical target isn't there, it's far more difficult knowing exactly where the ball has to be thrown. So not only does it make my throwing more accurate, but it also means that I don't have to measure each cup individually with a ruler, saving perhaps 20 to 30 seconds on each piece, which means if I'm throwing 100 mugs, that's about 15 minutes saved. And over the years that really adds up. Now, as I was making these mugs and filming the process from above in portrait, I managed to snap my wire. This is something that probably happens once a year or so, and it's for this reason that wiring off tools like this are ones that I always build and assemble myself from components I buy from a supplier here in the UK. Bath Potters, to be exact. I've bought a few different types of twisted metal wire, ranging from one that's relatively smooth, another that's a bit more textured, and finally the version that I've come to like best, which is really quite sharp, but when used to separate a pot from the wheel, it creates a rather jagged, thick slice, which I think is much less likely to stick back to itself, making pots a touch easier to lift away from the wheel. I also buy these brass crimps and these bits of dowel that have a groove cut around them, but this wooden part you can easily make yourself. And essentially, all I do is wrap the wire around one of these, and then I use a pair of pliers just to crimp the two bits of wire closer together. I then slot one of the crimps over the wire and slide it down, slotting it as far down as I can and over the other strand that's wrapped around the dowel. And with both of the wires inserted through the crimp, I wiggle it around until I can get it as close to the wood as I can. And then I use another pair of pliers to flatten the crimp, sandwiching the wire in between them. I then do the exact same thing for the other end, making sure I slot the crimp on first before I do anything else. I like making these myself, as I can make wires any length I want, and as wires like this tend to get kinks in them really easily, being able to make them yourself when you need them is really helpful, and it's also much cheaper than buying ready-made ones. I tend to use the smoother metal wires for when I'm slicing up blocks of clay when I'm wedging, but when separating pots from the wheelhead, I like this shell wire, as it's called. I think it does kink a bit more easily, but the cut it creates is much wider, and it makes lifting pots off the wheel easier. I'll leave links to as many of these materials as I can in the description of this video. The only thing I'd recommend is finding square dowels if you can, as they're less likely to slip in your grip as compared to these round ones. With that interlude out of the way, I can begin throwing these properly. This is the standard mug shape I make, and fundamentally they are just very simple cylinders, but there are a few subtle details to them which take them beyond just being a dead simple, straight up and down cylinder. The centering of these is quick, and I prefer using clay that isn't too firm when making these. I begin by forming it into a low disc like this, and then I sink a finger and thumb right into the very centre, stopping when there's about 3 or 4 millimeters in the base. And then I open up the bottom and use one of my weird bent thumbs to flatten and compress the base, to get rid of those deeper spirals, as I'd rather the glaze sits and melts flat on this part. I then pinch the walls with a knuckle on the outside and a finger on the inside, and compress the walls up into a conical shape like this. And for this first pull I really am just pinching. I'm not doing what's shown here during this next step, where I create a bulge and I lift this from beneath. When doing that first pull, I'm just pinching from either side to thin out a thicker ring of clay that makes up the wall. And with the height almost there, I do one final pull with my fingertips, pressing in at the bottom, widening the shape, and throwing a very subtle taper into the cup. I want my mugs to be wider at the bottom than at the top. Only slightly, at least, and if anything, I exaggerate this during the throwing stage. Then, once leather hard, it can be trimmed back, the vessel made lighter, and the taper made not quite so apparent. The next thing I do is scrape away the excess clay from around the base, continuing the straight wall through that skirt of clay, and I'm being careful not to remove too much, or dig in excessively horizontally, as you can quickly ruin the shape this way. I then use a sponge on a stick to remove the excess water from inside the shape, and I actually push quite hard with this against the floor to flatten it even further. I then hover the sharp metal kidney on the outside where I want the profile of the pot to be, and I push the clay out against it. This puts a lot less stress on the shape as compared if I were to simply jam the piece of metal straight into the pot. I also find it leaves me with cleaner surfaces and helps me to soften the throwing rings on the inside of the pot. Any collision with the pointer doesn't matter as it's made of rubber, so whilst it can leave a slight scratch, it's never anything too difficult to tidy up, and it's for this reason that I avoid metal or wooden pointers, as they damage the vessel much worse. And then, before I slice the pot off the wheel, I lift up the pointer, as doing this drags the pot a few millimeters towards me, and if I were to spin the pot and the pointer was still down, it would hit one side of the spinning vessel, leaving a mark. Now, when I lift the pot off the wheel, there's a few things I'm considering. The first being that when a pot is wired through, it often distorts the shape and makes it just slightly oval. So I make sure when I pick the form off the wheel, I'm lifting it from either side where that oval shape is, pushing it back to being round. It can then be carried away and set aside. There's a lot more to this method of lifting pots off the wheel, and it's actually a topic I've made another much longer video about. And if you're interested, I'll leave a link to that video on screen now and in the description below. The rim is another really important part. In fact, it's probably the most important part of the entire piece. If it's a vessel I'm going to drink from, I bevel this edge to the outside, as this makes it much more comfortable to drink from, as it fits far more comfortably into the corners of your mouth. It also visually creates a finer edge, which makes the vessel appear lighter, and also, from a visual standpoint, it makes the interior form look as if it's offering out whatever's inside it. If, on the other hand, the bevel angled inward, it creates a shape that's more enclosed and less inviting to drink from. And from this angle, you can clearly see that subtle tapering shape I was speaking about. So yes, it is a basic cylinder, but there's a lot of attention to the interior shape, the lip, and the taper of the exterior. When I lift pots off the wheel, I scrape a majority of the slip off the inside of my hands, and I rest them on the surface of the pot. I'm not pushing them inward, and the two slightly tacky surfaces stick to each other, and the pot lifts away with my hands. This skim of clay that's left, if it's dry at least, is really worth keeping, as it's sticky, and when the next lump of clay is thrown against it, it'll help that piece of clay fuse onto it, so that it's held in place more securely as you centre, like so. Another thing I've been doing recently is keeping all my tools on a bat, like this. This way the mess from my tools is contained, and it makes tidying up later faster. Now, that dry skim of clay has another advantage. It helps increase my speed when production throwing, as if you are one of those people who slides water underneath their pot and then wires that slip through. After each pot you make, you've got to clean up the wheel head, dry it, so that the next lump of clay can actually stick. And if you are making say 50 or 100 pieces in one go, this can again add a tremendous amount of time to the process. So I think you are better off if you're making lots of pots to use bats, or teach yourself to lift pots off the wheel like I do. They're pretty similar. At the end of the day, I don't mind if the shapes do alter very slightly, or if one is perhaps a millimetre taller or shorter than my throwing cage's pointer. Some height will be lost when I trim the bases of these, and they are handmade objects after all. In fact, that's really part of their charm. I know the differences will be harder to see for you, but as the thrower of this board of pots, I can see the differences really easily. The heights do vary really slightly, and the rims on some of these undulate, but I don't mind. The undulations are only ever visible when the wheel is spinning anyway. Like in this footage, the rim's wobbling here, and the undulation is noticeable, but then when the wheel is stopped, you simply don't see it. So yes, I don't mind if the rims undulate a tiny bit, or even if the rims are slightly oval in the finished pieces, as long as it's not too bad, of course. There was one person once who sent me a photograph of my mugs from the top down with a photoshopped circle placed over each to show me that they weren't perfectly circular. I know my objects are carefully and precisely made, but even pots made in factories can have slight ovality in their rims, and I think if I was buying handmade pottery, I just wouldn't care about those minute irregularities. But I know I'm biased, as a maker of these objects, and a person who's immersed themselves in this craft. Sometimes when making these mugs, I am admittedly a little bit lazy in the centering. I can feel that there's an irregularity when I open the walls up like this, but it's surprising just how much you can fix when you're actually pulling the walls up. As I lift them, I place a thumb on the lip, and as I pull the walls up, I'm also pressing down with this thumb, compressing the lip and nullifying any undulation, or at least getting rid of the worst of it. It really works surprisingly well, but it does take some getting used to, as you're sort of applying pressure in two different ways, and it means you're thinking about rather a lot as you're working. There's a real routine to throwing these mugs. A majority of the height is achieved in the first two pulls, the shape and the last bit of height is achieved in the third pull. The excess is scraped away from the bottom, the sides are cleaned, the lip is beveled, excess water is taken out from the inside, and that's it. I try to stay in this routine as I'm throwing mugs, as it helps me make more efficiently and quickly. And I know that won't apply to everyone. The aim of the game isn't always to make pots as fast as you can, but when you're a business owner and you do every little aspect of this job yourself, you quickly realise how little time you actually have making. So, if you can be more efficient, the more pots you can produce in the time you've got to make. Lastly, I want to talk a bit about burnout. I've been making pottery and posting about it since April 2014, so I think it is only natural to some degree to go through periods where I do feel more burnt out, and at the moment I am sort of in one of those slumps, I think. I don't feel particularly motivated to make, which is partly why I've started with mugs, because at this point I can produce them with my eyes closed. I know that in a few weeks I'll have lots of new shapes that I can't wait to fire, but at the moment I'm finding it relatively difficult to gear myself up to make pots and to film the process. I know that this is in part probably the January blues too, but I'm also finding it unmotivating to be in the workshop due to a leaky roof that the landlord won't fix, despite some of the panel sealing in some places in the workshop coming loose. Anyway, all of that's to say, I won't be going anywhere, obviously, but I would find it helpful if you have any video suggestions, be it small throwing tips you'd like to see me explain thoroughly, new shapes to explore, anything, really, as long as it's not a moon jar. But maybe I should explain my thoughts on that, as many of you responded to that point when I made it last. In the West, at the moment, there is a fascination with this shape, and fundamentally it is one of Korea's cultural symbols. Now, a video of me attempting to make one of these wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, but I think if I were to suddenly begin making them and selling them with no real connection to Korea, I think that just enters a zone that makes me feel a little bit uneasy. And actually, I met somebody recently who made a good comparison. For instance, say you lived in the States, and suddenly, because it was trendy, potters all over the country started to make ceramics in the style of Native American pottery, without it being part of their heritage and having any real connection to it. They were simply making the forms as they'd become popular and were part of the current zeitgeist. In that instance, it borders cultural appropriation, and I suppose I feel the same way about potters making specifically moon jar shapes in the West. The thing is, this is a really broad conversation, with lots of grey areas that are difficult to discuss, because even considering all of that, I feel like cross-pollination between cultures and their arts is a good thing, provided it's done in the right way, with a fair amount of cultural exchange from both parties, learning and taking interest in what each other do. So, that's the reason that I don't make things like moon jars, or chawans, or yonomis, or sakeware, and despite how much you guys ask me to do those, it's not going to happen. I wrote a couple of pages dedicated to this topic in my book in the final quarter when I was doing my apprenticeship in Japan, if you are after some further reading. Anyway, I'm going to head back and try and get my motivation up again. I always feel better once I get back into the proper rhythm of making, and I suppose ultimately that's what I've not been doing for the past couple of months, as I've been so focused on glazing, firing, and updating my online shop. Part of what I want to do this year, and I really need to make time for it, is more really thorough glaze experimentation, as I'm still dying to find some new surfaces that go on thinly and have a lot of character. Glazes that don't pad and cover the clay work underneath so much, as I spend so much time trimming and finessing my pots and getting them precisely to my liking, only to often cover that in a thicker layer of glaze that hides it. So if you do have any ideas of glazes that you think could be interesting, again, please do let me know and I'll do some research. For now though, I'll be setting these mugs out overnight with some plastic slung really loosely over them. I don't want to completely smother them, but if they're left fully exposed, those on the edge will dry out quickly and they'll likely warp a tiny bit, as they're thrown relatively thinly. And in the morning I'll flip them over onto their rims, so that the slightly thicker, damper bases can dry out. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch, and I'm happy to be back after a week's break. In fact, it's been a couple of weeks, as my last 2 videos were made a while ago and scheduled, so that I could have some proper time off over the holidays. I hope you all had a very peaceful break, and, as always, I'll see you next time.